Hey, practice owners, welcome back to another edition of Coming Back Stronger. I am really excited to have our guest on today, Jayme Amos, Ideal Practices. We were talking ahead of time about sort of this whole process, the coronavirus shutdown and the impacts on existing practices. And I was telling Jayme, it occurred to me that there had to be docs who were, they got their funding, they had their leases signed, they're ready to start up next Monday morning, and they get a text from the president or whatever that says country shut down, or the governor says, you can't go to work, dentists are off, and so what do they do? So I reached out to Jayme because with his company, he does more startups than anybody in the country and has done more. I think you do 50 to 100 private startups a year. Is that right, Jayme?
Yep.
Yeah,
50 to 100 per year, and it's all over the country. Yeah.
And so I reached out to the guy that I know, and really I think what Jayme brings is this perspective on what happens if you're starting up. And again, we had a conversation ahead of time that this is probably one of the most unique times in history to do a startup in dentistry. So with that, Jayme, how you doing?
Great. So grateful to be able to do something like this and be here. When people talk to us about startups, I think in general, the perception in dentistry is that startups are so risky. And I would say, yeah, actually, startups are very risky. Startups without a plan are in immense risk with very little upside if you don't have a good plan in place, which is why startups have this perception of being risky in dentistry. And that's why most associate dentists end up opening a startup practice by following advice from so-called experts. They open startups and then they need a part-time job for 4 or 5 years just to pay the bills in the startup. And that's not business success. That just means you're paying the loan back because somebody sold you chairs and somebody told you to sign a lease. While that is practice ownership, I would say that's sad. The associate dentists don't need to go down that path. As a contrast, I can give you story after story of doctors with zero business experience choosing a startup, fighting really hard, working their tail off, stepping up with a lot of courage, and even collecting $1 million in the first 12 months from a cold scratch startup. Even in areas with bad demographics, some people say you need a great demographics ratio. You don't necessarily. So I think, some of the things that we could talk about today are how are these doctors who are opening cold scratch startups literally in the middle of a lockdown, or quite literally smack dab in the middle of this pandemic, how are associate dentists opening their doors for the first time ever and having their best financial days of their personal career happen right then? And I can give you literal examples of this happening in real time around the country right now with practices we're seeing open. So today, I would love to speak right to associate dentists. If you're a doctor and you're watching this and you're thinking, I already own a practice, I've thought about a startup. Well, frankly, some of these things may or may not be relevant to you. I do have some really powerful insights that could give you some hope about the rise of startup practices and associate dentists. But I also want to share specifically for associate dentists what's actually happening with startups, not what maybe people in social media are talking about who like to pretend they know about startups, or maybe opened one startup one time in one town with mediocre results. Let's take a big sample size and talk about what's actually happening. So there you go. How's that for a sound for a conversation?
Awesome. And I think I'd like to sort of frame this maybe a little bit for the listeners, and again, associates. And I think somebody who's decided, because I think what's happening, Jayme, is a lot of it is more pulled back. A lot of docs are pulling back and saying, now's going to be a terrible time to open any business. And, maybe if it was a restaurant, maybe. But dentistry is completely different. It has its unique characteristics. And what I wanted to frame it as is, and I think you do de novo cold start startups, right? You do any practice training?
Just startups.
So let's frame it up like this, because I think a lot of docs who come out of dental school, and I've seen this, I've done this, they come out and they think, okay, I'm going to go into practice for myself. So I'm going to go work for Dr. Jones down the street for 3 years. And we kind of have a handshake deal, and I'm not a dentist, I'm the business guy. So I get into this on the back end after it's, we're trying to unexplode that bomb. And they say, well, yeah, I started working 3 years ago, and I was working, barely enough to pay off my student loans. And he was going to retire at 65. And, then I was going to take over for free. He's just going to give me the practice. You've never heard that before, have you, Jayme? Sort of how that works. So here's how that story ends.
I haven't heard it in the last 24 hours. But...
Right. And that so I've never understood that. So, so two things happen. Number one is the selling doc says, this is kind of sweet. I got somebody coming here working for really nothing. And now I can work 2 days a week and travel a bunch. And, I'm going to retire around 65, 69, 74, somewhere in there. And young doc says, man, I've been beating my brains out here for 3 years and I'm mad and I'm going to go out and do my own thing. Or plan B is they actually go through with it. About half the patients leave and all the staff leaves in about 6 months because it's too dynamically different. A 67-year-old dentist who's retiring and loves doing removables is not a 32-year-old dentist who loves doing all this fancy new CAD/CAM junk. And so the patient base is uncomfortable. And the first thing they do is say, well, now that old Dr. Jones isn't here, I'm going to look around, go down the street. And the staff really liked that they all knocked off, they never worked on a Friday and they all knocked off early on Thursday. And, doc bought lunch every day. And new doc comes in and says, that was awesome, but cash flow is important right now. So no lunches. We all work all day Thursdays, and if we overload, we work Fridays. So they scatter. And so the reason I bring that up is I think a lot of dentists graduating who choose to be practice owners, not go work for a group or larger group or small group or whatever, is they think that's the path because it has been the path for decades. Come out, associate with somebody, take over their practice. That blows up about 98+% of the time. Then they get mad. Now they're 3 or 4 years behind. And then they start something out of desperation and they gut it out for 10 years. So I think the message today, number one, is you don't have to do that. That is not the model anymore. And number two, specifically right now in history, money's never been cheaper. You were telling me earlier about real estate has never been cheaper or easier. I guarantee you the supply companies are extending all kinds of amazing terms. I mean, it just literally can't be a better time, right?
Yeah, if you wanted to maybe coin a phrase for this entire discussion, here's what we could flesh out here. The reality is this. Right now, May and June 2020, I'm going to call the shot. Like, you can quote me. You can look back on this in history and you can say, that was the date Jayme Amos said that this is the best time ever to start a startup dental practice. Mm-hmm. And I want to prove that today. I'm not here to make the case because a startup is not right for everybody. It's just not. But if a startup is right for someone, right now, there are specific opportunities. I can even give 3 specific ones today that we're seeing unfold around the country in real time. They're not theory. Like, this stuff's happening right now. Like, the clock is ticking. And these huge opportunities, I'm talking 6 and even 7-figure opportunities that are uniquely available to associates, only associates who are thinking of doing a startup who get started now. The bad news, if there's bad news in this, is that this is almost like a window that's open, maybe like a window in a house where the draft is coming in and is bringing in a nice breeze. You could enjoy this draft of a nice breeze while the window's open, but this window is closing. In the next 6 to 9 months, the window will close and the opportunity will be over. That doesn't mean that you can't do a startup in 9 months from today. But I am assuring you, please quote me, right now, we've got a 6 to 9 month window of time where these opportunities are mind-blowing, better than I've ever seen. Many of them are reminding me, my team and I have analyzed a lot of the data, where they're reminding me of some very similar recurring patterns that we saw back in 2008 and 2009 after the big financial mess. And these will benefit startup practice owners in an incredible way that today we can talk through some of these. I can tell you, like, here in pandemic land or quarantine land, I'm in a part of the country that is actually on like major lockdown. We're not allowed to leave our property. Actually, now we are this week, but for the last month or month and a half, we haven't been allowed to even like leave our space of land. So that's been it's been a new reality. I know a lot of people around the country have dealt with similar things. For me, it gave me a chance to sit back and say, okay, this bad news, I can't travel, I can't go speak on stages or whatever. I can't go visit family back in other parts of the country. This is bad news in some ways, but what are things that could be opportunities for me in this time? And I started thinking of my daughter. She's 12 now. I haven't had a daddy-daughter date, prior to the quarantine. I hadn't had like a legit daddy-daughter date in, I don't know. I'm in my house, so maybe like 2 years, right?
Yeah.
And it was like embarrassing and sad. Like, man, the clock is ticking. She's 12 now. Like this window's going to close. So I decided at the beginning of the quarantine, you know what? Every other week, we're going to do a daddy-daughter date. We can't go to a restaurant.
Right.
So it won't be that. But instead, this has been amazing. Every other week now, we've had daddy-daughter date with a muffin and a little tub of icing. So a tub of icing and a muffin. And before the daddy-daughter date, I say, hey, her name's Sienna. I say, Sienna, come to the daddy-daughter date. You and me will each come with 2 or 3 questions for each other. And we'll just like ask each other the question. And Steve, I got to tell you, like, it's probably been like the coolest experience as a dad. And I think these are lifetime memories that we're creating together on our balcony.
You'll never forget it. Yeah.
Never forget it.
Yeah.
On our balcony, overlooking the water with a muffin and some icing, because of the quarantine, because of the bad news. So, and I think it's a little like that right now with startups. I think for those who are willing to say, okay, I'm stuck in my situation, but if I pick my head up and look outside of this exact situation, there are unique opportunities available because of this situation. And those are, we can talk through, you mentioned real estate, specifically on real estate, just for startups, remember, for real estate, this is crazy. We're about to see deals. We're about to see deals with landlords unroll that will be the best deals of your life.
Yep.
Steve, of your life, of my life, of anybody watching. It will be, you will look back and say, oh, I coulda. I'm talking 6 or 7 figure opportunities from landlords. Steve, you and I were just talking about a doctor in Florida. One of our clients, this just happened a couple weeks ago. His name's Andrew. If you're listening, my friend, shout out to you. One of our clients, we negotiate all the real estate, we negotiate construction, we negotiate with bankers and all that stuff for our clients. We get to the real estate stage for him. Andrew here, he said, hey, do you guys think this is a good deal that was all negotiated? We said, actually, it's probably better than we've seen in many years, maybe ever. 30 months of free rent.
Yeah.
Let me put that in perspective. That's 2.5 years of not having to write a rent check.
Right.
2.5 years. We're also seeing situations where landlords are coughing up more money than ever for free construction. I mean, like huge 6-figure allowances that are going into the construction budgets. That's like free money. So why is this happening? Well, the reality is it's bad news for landlords. Like there's going to be some pain. There's going to be substantial pain in this country, economically speaking. There will be significant pain. Think of like a local barbershop and their business was already not doing well. Or a restaurant that was already like, you could tell, like their bathrooms were gross and they were on the decline. They were going to go out of business anyway. Those little retail shops, in this example, they're going to go out. I hate saying it, but they're going to go out of business. They're not going to make it. And that's bad for our country. Will we rebound? Absolutely. Are we going to get a V shape or an L shape or a W shape? Who knows? Who cares? We will rebound because this thing called this pandemic, it will be bookended. It's starting over here and it will end over here. There's going to be a vaccine or herd immunity, whatever you want to call it. It's going to end. It has started. It's going to stop. It will stop. Whether that's tomorrow or next year, we will rebound. Is that restaurant coming back? No. And this is the opportunity, because for the landlord, it's bad news. But for a startup practice, you can step into that situation and negotiation with the landlord. And if you have the leverage and you have the experience to negotiate on that level with the landlord and communicate clearly to the landlord all the benefits of this, there are 6- and 7-figure opportunities that are not just theory, they're actually happening right now. So that's for startups who are going to, that's for associates who are going to step forward into practice ownership. Apparently, from our data, it looks like about 84% of associates desire to become practice owners.
Right.
So we're hearing from a lot right now that of the vast majority of associate dentists we're hearing things like, I lost my job. I don't know when I'm coming back in. Or, this is frustrating, I'm still getting paid just on collections, and I'm told I'm only allowed to do hygiene now because the senior doctor is going to take in all the restorative work.
Right, right.
That, that's called no control. That's called no control.
Yeah.
Over your life, over your career, over your income. There's no control there. And being an associate dentist is a really good path. I mean, historically, it's been a pretty good career, pretty good path. But I think a lot of associates are coming to grips with the reality that the associate income is just binary. It's like it's either on or it's off. Mm-hmm. It's like my income, my paycheck is on or I lose my job. Mm-hmm. And there's zero control there. As a practice owner, everybody knows like you have multiple options. You have multiple paths. You have a community that can rally to your attention and rally to your cause. Now, we've had a lot of our clients say that other community members, other business associations, other community leaders are stepping in and rallying for the practice because of relationships that are intentionally and very strategically set up in the months before opening. They're rallying together on behalf of a dentist. Yeah, on behalf of a dentist, because all the steps are done properly even before opening day. And this is why, Steve, you and I were talking through many of our startup clients who are either opening from cold scratch startups or reopening after like they were open for a month and then boom, pandemic, like shut the doors, shut it down, go home. For the love of God, what do I do? I got $500K on the line and my family and food, and I just quit my job. Oh, actually, here, watch that. Can I show you something really cool? Get this.
Yes,
this guy.
Please. Yeah.
Let me pull this up. So we set up a page. I don't know if anybody can see this on my phone. This is a little jerry-rigged. Steve and I are just going up here.
That's okay. old school. That's what I do, Jayme. I'm not smart enough to do the screen share stuff.
I won't do the screen share.
But when I do, I screw it up. So
okay, so on our website, this is the Ideal Practices website. Mm-hmm. There's a yellow bar at the top, at least for these couple of months, and the yellow bar says how are startup dentists surviving during COVID-19. So if you click on the bar, you can see 4 startup stories of doctors who opened during the pandemic. So we rolled this out. You can just go to our website, click on the thing. If you do, you're going to see. Here's Jared. I can tell you. We could talk about Jared's story. He reopened during the quarantine, but this is the one I want to show you now. Dr. David. Dr. David, cold scratch startup, opened during the quarantine. You can see he's smiling in this picture.
Yeah, but, which you would think is completely contrary to what people are doing in the COVID crisis.
He just opened. I'll read you the quote here. It says right here, 2 days before my grand opening. Ready? Put yourself in David's shoes. He's got $500,000 on the line. He's been preparing for 9 months to a year with my team to go through all the process, all the steps. Scared to death, rightfully so. He says it in the quote. I'll read it to you. It says 2 days before my grand opening, I lost my associateship job. And he goes on to say, and my wife is due with our second child. And then later in the interview, he says, now I can't believe the success we're having even in our first week in the middle of a pandemic. Dr. David here, when he opened his doors, his very first day was better than his personal best production goals in private practice ownership as an associate. Yeah. He did better right out of the gate with his startup in the middle of a pandemic because everything was set up the right way up front. So I like to say, are startups risky? Heck yeah, very risky. That's why you hear so many people struggle for years. But when it's set up the right way, we have this unique moment in time right now where we can access these incredible opportunities like the real estate, plus be able to have these massive success stories right out of the gate. So I didn't mean to talk quite so long. I feel like I'm hogging the airwaves here a little bit. But anyway, I get excited about this because of all that. So
well, I had 2 questions for you, 2 observations I wrote down here that I think, this is what you and I do. We didn't go to dental school because when you go to dental school, what you do is, you know how to prep a crown, you know how to sink an implant, you know how to do all these things, but negotiating real estate is not your thing. So I've watched, and I'm sure you have, I've watched docs before this, we'll say 90 days and before, get into really, okay real estate deals, okay leases, and that could have been a little bit better. But while you were talking, I think the interesting thing is the dynamics are changing. And if you're an associate who wants to take on getting your practice going, creating your clinical protocols and do all that stuff, and take this on, it's one thing. My advice has always been, and I know is let the pros do what they do well. Let your accountant be the accountant. Let guys like you get the startup part together so that the doc can focus on what's important to them.
Yeah, if you were a dentist, you would never tell your patient to go to dental school to learn how to fix the decay in their mouth, right? There's no need for the patient to go invest 4 years and learn through the trial and error and learn the mistakes.
Go on YouTube and
do one full mouth reconstruction. If it's a once in a lifetime thing, just go to the expert and save yourself the 4 years and the few $100,000 of dental school, and then have the expert take care of your full mouth reconstruction instead of trying to figure it out on your own.
Right. There are two questions I wanted to ask. One is just your observations, what you've seen. My wife works for a large healthcare company, and and she's kind of a higher up. She's in the corporate tower and all, and they had a 40-story building, and they started going agile, is what they call it, about 3 years ago. And so now it's just a natural extension. They were already doing it. Instead of going in a day or two a week, now they go in none. She hasn't been to the corporate tower for 3 months now. As it turns out, they found out the other day, they had three quarters of 40 floors were her company, and the rest of it was, I guess they lease it out to make up a little bit. They're completely out of that building. There's a 40-story building in Louisville, Kentucky that has empty. No more of Humana in it. It's empty. It's out, empty. So if I were a company that had to have my customers come in, or if I were a company that had to have personal interaction, that space, I guarantee you, is super highly negotiable. The second piece is in your your strips and that kind of thing, or even if I'm in one now, and you tell me if you've seen this, I've heard dentists say they've gone back to their landlord and say things like, listen, I'm, cash is going to be tight. I'm going to stick with my 3-year lease or my 5-year lease. But, I need a break. I need 6 months of whatever. And landlords are saying, absolutely, no problem. As long as I know you're going to be here for 5 years, we'll work with this year. Have you seen have you negotiated any of those kind of funky deals that never existed before?
That goes right back to that binary choice. If as an associate, you're stuck with this binary on-off income, on-off career, on-off options. It's on or off. As a practice owner, you then have options like negotiating with your landlord if times get tough. I can tell you, just buyer beware. Please, if you're an associate, you're listening to this, you're like, okay, I see some opportunity. We go through all of these kinds of things with our clients. We actually just released a masterclass. It's an audio masterclass called the Startup Dentist Masterclass. We released it in podcast form so people can access it for free. Very similar, if not identical, concepts that we guide all of our clients through. We handhold and we go through side by side the whole process for the whole year. So here, actually, can I show you something?
Yeah, please. I want to make sure we get the link in the show notes too.
This is weird, but I used this on a training. Here's a big whiteboard. Ready? You'll laugh at this.
Oh, there we go.
I didn't make it for you. I wish I did. I bet I didn't make it for you. Okay, look. So hopefully nothing's been erased or written here that shouldn't be here. But I use this for a different training. It says, can you read this? It says www.startupdentistpodcast.com. Can you read it? Okay, so there'll be a visual reminder. There you go. We're live. We're just doing this in real time. Okay, so I have this here, Startup Dentist Podcast, because the way that you negotiate, specifically with real estate, as the tenant, the negotiation strategy is wildly different from the negotiating strategy of the typical person a realtor, a dentist relies on. In other words, your motives, your interests for your future practice as you negotiate with real estate, please catch this. They are very different motivations from that of the realtor. Now that sounds weird. It almost sounds like heretical, because realtors will say, no, we've got your best interests. We're going to represent you. We're going to advocate for you. Those things might be true to some degree. But remember, a realtor does not earn a paycheck. A realtor literally doesn't get to put food on their table until you sign the lease. They get paid only when you sign the lease. So think about that from a subconscious or a psychological perspective, way in the base of their brain. They don't make a living until you sign a lease. And sadly, maybe by accident, a lot of realtors will leave so much in the negotiations, and they'll tell people, you'll hear them use this quote, like I'm going to give some air quotes here. You will see realtors use this phrase. They'll say, oh, you know what? We've negotiated hard enough. We don't want to lose the deal. Those words, we don't want to lose the deal, run.
Right.
Run. That is not appropriate. If you're negotiating for real estate, the goal is not to save the deal. Guess whose goal that is? The goal is not to save the deal. The goal is to protect your future. And the lease is the number one value of your practice. No lease, no practice. That's it. So why is this a big deal? Well, obviously I just shared some of why it's a big deal, but let me give you a very specific example back in Pennsylvania. I haven't talked about this for years, but I grew up in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is one of 7 states in the country that still allows 17 states in the country that legally still allows a clause called confession of judgment. I was just reminded of this a week ago when one of my buddies said, hey, Jayme, I know you guys negotiate leases for dentists. I'm doing this thing for my business. Can you look it over? I was like, oh, I'm not an expert in that. Like, if you want me to, I'm just kind of like an opinion that might not matter, but I'm looking through and I found the confession of judgment. The confession of judgment clause alone is a deal killer. Deal killer. Confession of judgment in a lease means, ready? This is going to sound like not true. A confession of judgment clause means I, the tenant, legally admit that I'm wrong whenever that time comes up. I'm confessing judgment. I'm literally writing my name down and saying, I confess against myself that I did wrong for something that I don't even know I did yet. It is 100% legal in 17 states still. I remember being hypersensitive to this, being from Pennsylvania. My buddy, who was from a different state, he had never seen that before. And I'm reading through his lease. I was like, whoa, Dan. His name's Dan. I said, Dan, this alone, like, I don't know your industry, but that clause alone, run for your life. Right. And he was presented that by his realtor. So I'm not saying that realtors are not good for the process. They play a very important role in the process. But when it comes to lease negotiations, like, check out the strategies in startupdentistpodcast.com. Again, totally free masterclass. I'll get this out of the way. Let me give you another one. There's a typical thought about the doc to population ratio. Steve, have you looked into some of the demographics things?
Yep. Density.
So in the doctor to population ratio, many people believe that this doctors to population as a ratio is the end all be all for choosing where in the country you should open. Well, I like to say, well, it's a very simple premise, right? The concept is pretty easy to understand. Like, take total number of people divided by total number of dentists. So as long as you can get the data, which you can, it's not hard. As long as you can get the data, just make a ratio out of it. And the theory says that, poof, they don't have this great practice. Well, it's pretty simple. Any dentist can do it to get the ratio. But if that was really the linchpin to success, why do so many startups struggle?
Right.
Right? Like, oh yeah, it's not hard to get the ratio, which would imply every dentist has gotten a decent ratio because it's not hard. But why do so many startups struggle for so many years? Because it's not about the ratio. So for a startup today, in this economy, in this environment, there's going to be some crazy shifts in ratios because some older, funky practices are going to go out of business. The ratios are going to start flopping around. Ratios are going to, in some markets, become weirdly, wildly, instantly attractive. That still doesn't mean it's a good place to open your practice. The ratio alone is not like a video game cheat code where you go up, up, down, down, left, right, A, B, start. Like, it's not a cheat code for a video game where you plug it in and then poof, I have a great practice. I can even give you plenty of examples of doctors with really bad demographics ratios, horrible ones, in fact, who we've helped grow $1 million startups in their first year.
Right.
So
still profitable with theoretically not enough patients.
Yeah, right.
Because the ratio doesn't work. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So in today's environment with COVID, I am 100% confident that we're going to look back on this time and say, those moments, those window moments, we had this window of time where I could have jumped in and given myself a major advantage. So we can continue to talk about those if you want.
Yeah, I also had down here money. We had talked ahead of time. You know, as non-dentist, as business guys and finance guys, I mean, Jayme, I have never seen money even. And I had this conversation with on a couple different episodes here about the PPP money,
Yeah.
and to look at it, maybe even if you're starting up, if you're 2 months in or 3 months in, and you haven't established payroll, and you took some of that. I mean, even if it's a loan and you use that, if you say, I'm not going to get it forgiven just because of the timing of things, but it's a loan, it is no payments for 6 months and then 1% interest. And I'm watching some of the legislation. I think it'll be extended even further. It literally is free money to market, to promote, to do whatever you want to do with. You won't find any cheaper money to start a practice than right now. Even a regular loan are 2%, 2.25%, and delayed, no payments for 6 months and then stretch them. I mean, banks want the businesses that are going to survive to bank with them. That's sort of what they're looking for.
You bring up a really good point. We've all heard, you've done so many credible interviews. What is it, 60 some interviews through the Profitable Dentist channel now on these topics. Really insightful things. One of the phrases I keep hearing, maybe you're recognizing this too. It's almost like a drum beat that we're hearing, and it's run your practice like it's a startup.
Mm-hmm.
Hear that? Yep. We need a shift, right? You're going to hear a lot of people say we need to shift our mindset so we run our practice like a startup. So why do existing practice owners say that, and what does that mean? Well, you can listen to people who are saying that and listen to what they mean. I would tell you it means this. How about instead of running it like a startup, how about have a startup? Mm-hmm. Because in order to run like a startup, it means you weren't before, which means you're trying to change the culture of an organization. Steve, you own multiple businesses, businesses that serve dentists all over the country in really cool ways, like lab and having a predictable, high integrity, dependable lab. But if you go trying to change the culture, that's like trying to change someone's DNA. Right. Usually when you try to change DNA, like things get screwed up. Like you change the wrong letter in the DNA strand and I turn into a frog, right? You can't just go in and change the DNA of something very easily. You usually get some really awful side effects. When trying to change the culture of an organization, running like a startup, that's going to be really painful and disruptive. Right. And team members will be lost out of frustration. And the vision of the doctor, even if it is communicated eloquently, even if it is led with optimistic leadership, even if there's so many frustrating human realities of dealing with change in real time with all these other stresses involved, I would advocate, let's listen to those established practice owners and remember that when times got tough, they said, run it like a startup. Mm-hmm. And that implies running lean, of course, right? Mm-hmm. Having lower costs and being careful with that. That's, of course. It also means having access to capital. When you're a startup, it means you have access to capital to get you through the growth phase, like you're talking about, loans. Mm-hmm. We need access to capital. That's why we believe in building entire business plans a year before you open with pre-planned budgets and projections and categories. Those are all things that we do and we believe in, because you need to run lean, you need access to capital, and you need a plan to go to market so that you can have a surge of patients. So a plan to go to market, massive exposure, front page headline, newspaper exposure for free, marketing campaigns that get you hundreds of patients in your first few weeks. Those are the kinds of things that need to be rolled out more systematically across the country. Mm-hmm. And that's what running like a startup really is. So I would say, let's remember that in these tough times, the answer for many who were struggling said, let's run it like a startup. I advocate that we acknowledge that and say, how about we just have a startup, do a startup that runs the right way from the first day. So you're not like those other doctors who struggle for years in the startup process.
Yeah, I agree. I agree wholeheartely. I think the mindset is, and I was, when you were talking, I was thinking of my my good friend Linda Miles, and I tell her, I'll give her credit when I say this. She said that, the only people, we've got a lot of change to go through right now, and the only people who like change are babies in wet diapers. So your team is not, so if you change that culture, to your point, your team may not like that. They just want to get back to normal. People just want to get back to the way it was. And while that can't happen, you can't completely wipe the slate clean and start over. You still have, I think, and you said something interesting also that jumped out, marketing. I think your exposure right now in a startup can be a little more different and unique in that you have that blank slate. And there are going to be a lot of, I've heard people use terms, displaced patients. There are going to be a lot of displaced patients, and they want someone to go. Yeah.
I mentioned this. Let me look at a couple of notes here. I mentioned this. I think it was right at the beginning of our discussion. I mentioned 3 big topics that we're going to try to cover. Right.
Yes.
The first one is real estate. We covered a little bit of that. The second one is construction. I don't think we have enough time for that today. But so we talked a little bit about real estate. Second one is construction. I won't bore you with all the data we're seeing right now, but we're about to see in some markets. I'll just give you the punchline, and if anybody wants to talk about it later, we can. Here, the second one is construction. We're about to see construction costs in some markets drop by up to 50%.
Yes.
We saw this happen in 2008, 2009. Again, this is another window. It's just a window of opportunity. It will normalize. Construction companies will get back on their feet, but we're going to see if up to 50% decrease in construction costs. I've been getting some arrows shot at me by contractors who don't like that, but it's just a reality. So construction costs. And then thirdly is, you called it the displaced patient. That's a great term. Our team's been referring to this as the searching patient.
Okay.
We actually just had one of our clients open up and say, it's like a waterfall of patients coming from other practices. They're not, and I'm going to paraphrase, it's not that they're unhappy or that they're mad at their other practice. How should I say this? I don't enjoy saying what I'm about to say, but existing practice owners are about to lose hundreds, if not thousands, of patients.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
It's not their fault, but there are 2 factors that are really going to negatively hurt the practices that have been open for 10 or more years. This is really sad to say. I'm sure I'm going to get some hate mail, but now I'm just being candid. 2 factors. The first, this PPE thing, like patients have been going to a practice, they're thinking, wait, the carpet was already kind of dingy. The practice was already looking kind of funky. There's plenty of things that I kind of question, like, is that even modern? And there's realities, there's good reasons for all those things. I understand. That's okay. But in a patient's perception, the patient's mind, those are things that should have not been there in the first place. Now we've got this extra concern, this extra layer called the protection of their health that needs, now, is it 1 mask or 2 masks? Is it a face shield? Is it a space suit? Like, what is it? It is the number 1 search criteria for patients right now. The PPE topic, the number 1 search criteria when patients are considering which dentist to go to. And they're now reconsidering this question, which one to go to. It's this PPE topic. So if you're an existing practice owner and you're still watching, or if you're considering a startup, please do yourself a favor. For the next 2 years, I predict the next 2 years, the number 1 search criteria for patients choosing dentists is going to be PPE related. How do we know? Because we're all asking the same question, even about like the Domino's delivery guy. Like, is he going to have gloves? Is he going to have a mask? Is the COVID-19 in the box or on the box, right? We're all asking those questions with pizza. So of course your patients are going to be, even if they're not verbalizing it, it's in their mind. They're wondering about it. So here's my recommendation. The solution to this is answer the question before they come. Answer it with videos, answer it with FAQs, answer it with Facebook Lives, answer it in letters, answer it in email blasts, answer it however you can to give infinite comfort to answer that question. So that's problem number 1. So problem number 1 right now is that PPE, the searching patient. They're going to be searching for new dentists. And I don't enjoy saying that, but it's a reality that benefits startups disproportionately by a factor of multiple times greater than the benefit to existing practices. Startups have a unique advantage there. That's number 1. Number 2, so we got PPE number 1. Number 2 is related to what we call the patient overflow. So patients have been waiting to come in for what, 2 months? So now an existing practice has this backlog of patients that many of our startup clients are saying, Jayme, I'm getting patients coming in who say the reason they chose my practice is because they had a 3-month wait down the street.
Right.
But we got to get in now for whatever reason, emergency or not. We got to get in now Oh my. Whoa. This is a dental office? Holy crap, this place is gorgeous. Everything's new. Look at all the new technology. It looks fresh. It smells clean. Look at all the natural light. Like, that patient is never going to leave that startup.
Right. Right.
And it's not the fault of the existing practice owner. It's just the reality that if they're backed up for 3 months, you physically, humanly can't get them all in. You can't. And some of them are going to fall off the edge of the cliff and land in a startup. So again, I don't enjoy saying this. It's just reality. So let's call it what it is. And this will disproportionately benefit startups. And we're literally seeing this. It's not theory. I'm literally seeing this. Some of our clients, we're going to release another video here on those four COVID startups. We're releasing a 5th one from a Dr. Trey in the Carolinas. Dr. Trey had 26 new patients in his first week in the middle of lockdown. 26 new patients in the first week, working 2 days a week. Like, what? That's not normal. That's an average of 100 new patients during COVID-19.
Right.
And some of them were from the waterfall problem, the overflow problem. So those are 2 topics that I related to the searching patient that are disproportionately a massive advantage for startups, which is another reason why I just say, listen, for the associate dentists who are thinking about a startup, maybe it's a little like me and my daughter. Like, you might feel trapped, you might feel stressed, you might feel restricted, you might feel concerned about the future, like in the middle of quarantine here in my house. But what if there are some opportunities where you can go up on the balcony and you can have the time of your life? You can change the rest of your future and make lifetime memories because you found the opportunity in the middle of it. So, there's some thoughts for you.
Well, I think you're spot on. I think there are a lot of stories in how, new can be so much better if you use it well and right, because you can adapt quickly. And not only that, but you can create quickly where, patients don't have to, if I had a patient for 10 years and, they came in 10 years into my last remodel, and it's, it looks nice and it's okay. And it's, there's a lot of magazines around and carpet and, my old couch and whatever it was. And it was fine because I'm just here to get my teeth cleaned, to get a crown once in a while. The dynamics of why I chose that practice are completely different. I agree with you wholeheartedly than they're going to be going forward. So Doc A has to do 2 things. Number one, has to look at their practice with a fresh eye. And that is very, very, very hard. What is it they say? We don't see our own clutter. So
no, how about this? I don't see my own cobwebs. I mean, the cobwebs right there. I never, I don't even see them.
And Jayme, one of the things I used to do in my old days of practice consulting was I would say, here's one of the things we're going to do. We're going to go down, we're going to drive down the street. We're going to come back and we're going to pull into your practice and we're going to get out like a patient. So we'd pull into the car and they would, I would walk up and I'd say, we'd video and I'd say, what do you see? Oh, it looks, that door could use a little paint. And I say, well, that's awesome. But here's what I see. The bushes are dead. The grass is bald. The sign's falling down. The vinyl lettering is peeling off. When's the last time this guy spiffed this place up? Now I walk in the door and I say, oh my gosh, my grandmother had that couch. And, those magazines are from 3 years ago. They don't even see it. It's bizarre. We would walk in, they'd see like one thing. So that person's got to change all that. They've got to, so your patient has to unknow that stuff. And then know the new doc or excuse me, your new practice, which you're going to change to. And you have to explain it and you have to socialize it and you have to, share it and advertise it and all this versus.
Well, that goes right back to running like a startup, right, Steve? Yeah. Like in running like a startup, like we said, you have to, so unfortunately, you got to rip out a lot of old DNA, rebuild new DNA, but then also have access to capital in order to do this.
Right.
And the DNA includes like getting the buy-in from the team and trying to get ramped back up. So those things, I'm not making light of them. They're not easy. Those things are not easy at all.
That was my second thing. You and I have been business owners long enough and had enough team members that we've been through that change that we make, and back to Linda's thing, nobody likes it, but some people go along with it and adapt it, and some people they liked it the old way. I don't know why
That's
we
true.
have to change this. And I remember several years ago when as digital x-rays came along, there was a lot of staff that still liked, they like going in that little closet for 7 minutes and waiting for film. It was like a 7-minute vacation half a dozen times a day. And they would argue with that. And I had a very, I remember I had a hygienist, and I had a very stern talk with her one day. And I said, listen, we're doing this. It was a practice that I had acquired. And I said, we're doing this. This is not a discussion, because she would tell me why it didn't work and why film x-rays were better and all this kind of stuff. And I said, they might be, except we've bought it. We're doing it. There's all kinds of things that make it better. I'm not a clinician. Ask everybody else who works here, or go online. I don't care how you do it, but we're doing it at the end of the day. And I said, and here's something, this is about like our second talk. So, and I said, here's something else I want to just, tell you from my perspective. I'm the owner. So number one, we're doing it. It's not a discussion or debate. So you figure out how you internalize that. But number two, if this doesn't work out between us, your replacement will come in here every day and tell me how awesome this new x-ray machine is. They're going to tell me how fantastic look at all the things I can now do. They're going to be all about it, and I'm not going to be fighting this every Friday. So
this is so awesome. And when you hire somebody new, Steve, I'm ready to burst out of my skin.
They're going to love you. Yeah.
Startup Dentist Podcast, the whole thing, the whole masterclass is about pre-planning, dreaming up what you want, and you create it in real life. Then the people who say yes to that, they're all in. If you go do a startup practice, you first dream it up in your mind, then you have a system laid out that cuts down your risk and allows you to grow rapidly through that. So you're cutting out the financial concerns. Steve, you get it, and I hope if you're an associate dentist listening, please listen to this. The people who say yes, your team members, your new patients, they are saying yes to that. They are choosing that. So much so that we talk about practices of purpose. We actually say that there is, you can have a practice, and then you can elevate to profit. This is the startup sequence we use: practice, profit, purpose. So you can have a practice, just your doors are open. You can have profits, you have a good business, you're an entrepreneurial community leader, or you can have a practice of purpose. The team members who choose to work for that startup, if it's orchestrated properly, the team members who choose, they're no longer choosing to be there because of a paycheck.
Right.
They are then choosing to be there because of the purpose of the practice, which is so much better. We've had many of our clients say, oh my gosh, this whole system, this process works. We have team members coming and applying for the job. And I think they're more passionate about our cause than even I am, because it was all pre-planned. If you're forced to buy an old practice or change an existing practice out of need, I feel for you, because that's hard. The reason I love startups is you start with a blank slate. You don't have to go fixing problems. You just avoid problems. How much greater is that? You simply avoid them.
And you're also in a mindset where we're adapting rapidly right now. We're not, if I do a startup today, literally today, I know that for 3 months, for 1 month, it's going to be crazy bumpy. There's 50% of stuff we didn't even think of, junk that, we can't even figure out. And then, it'll smooth out in 90 days, but there's still surprises kind of coming our way. And then for a year, but we know that because it's a startup. It's like, it's figuring it out as we go. You compound that with having to unlearn stuff we've done for 10 years.
Oh, brutal.
PPE that, we didn't even know. I mean, Jayme, I was in in an industry, telecommunications industry where PPE was, we knew it inside and out. So it was funny. I would start having this conversation about 90 days ago or 60 days ago, and people had no idea what the heck you're talking about. What is that? We wear masks and we have gloves. We're good. And we wrap little plastic around the light. We're fine. And today it is, not only is it us as an industry, but you're right. Our patients, it's on their radar. Whatever they do about it, it's on their radar. And, if you've been doing this for 10 years or 20 years in your practice, and now you're going to have to spend a bunch of money and you're going to have to figure out how to turn ops, you're going to have to do all that, you've got that burden. Whereas in a startup, you just say, okay, here's our policy, period.
So I love that insight because it's so powerful. A lot of times I like to say, okay, to myself, I tell myself all the time, great insight. What do I do with it now? So here's a practical thing, whether you're an existing practice owner or you're thinking about a startup in the next year. Here's what you do with that. Like with what Steve just said, if you're one of those doctors who you're listening, you're like, oh, he's so right. That's a good insight. This is a trigger for you. Anytime you're like, insight, your job now is to write down the action. What action are you going to do with that insight? So you had an insight. Anytime you're like, oh, good point. Train yourself to say, good point, pause, write down the action. So here's what I want you to write down. For this action, I want you to tell yourself, okay, that is a question that patients are going to be asking before they even come in. Insight, what do you need to do? I recommend existing practice owner or startup. Write down the list of all the frequently asked questions that patients are asking themselves before they come to the practice. Some of them don't even know they're asking the question, but it's your job as the practice owner to understand your ideal patient. We pre-craft this with startups. We define the ideal patient. We build marketing messages specifically for them, but the ideal patient, it's your job to know your ideal patient. As you know your ideal patient, get in their head and write down all their top questions. We call them the frequently asked questions. These are not frequently asked questions like a website, like how do I get to the office? What do you charge? Not those. Write down all the questions they're asking, like on their couch at night, wondering about dentistry at large, right? Or wondering, in this case, wondering about PPE. Do they wear gloves? Do they take my temperature with a laser? Do they take my temperature with a thing? Does it get cleaned? Like, write all that stuff down. All the frequently asked questions. Then your job is to communicate the answers. Communicate the answers before they come in. I'm not talking about during the new patient tour, because they might not choose your practice if they don't think you answer that question. Answer the question on video, answer the question in newsletters, answer the question over email, over Twitter, over text message blasts, whatever you need to do to answer those questions, answer them now so that you can stay in a place where you're addressing those unanswered, unasked questions that your patients are asking back on their couch. So there's some action that I think anybody, practice owner or not, could put in motion right away.
It also can be a way to, again, to use an overused term, our new normal. We don't know what the new normal is yet, but we do know a direction that we're moving. And we do know that whether, I think you said it very well right then, whether they ask it or not, they might ask, do you take my insurance? But what they want to know is, I have, 2.3 kids. And I'll tell you a quick little example that, I don't know if you know Andrea Greer. Andrea speaks on office design. And one of the things I saw her speak one time, and she has this slide of this beautiful reception area. And, you look at it and you say, wow, that's amazing. And she said, look at this, it's beautiful. And they paid, and she has all the numbers. Here's how much the doctor paid to get it designed. And here's, it's these beautiful sofas, and it looks spa-ish. And here's this beautiful chrome and glass, coffee table and artwork and all this kind of junk. She said, it looks amazing unless you're a mom with 3 kids. And she goes, now here's what the mom sees. She walks in, there's a glass coffee table that one of the kids is going to break and whack. Here's these 3 things the kids are going to knock over. This beautiful vase that's sitting here in this little niche, and she doesn't know which one, but little Johnny's going to knock that over. The mom is going through all this stuff in her head when she walks in. We might look at it and say, oh, this is beautiful. Mom says, here's all the junk that's about to go wrong. I think the same thing applies when they're looking at you and they have 3 kids and they come in and they say, Jayme, I've heard take all the paper out of your office. No, the flyers that are sitting on the counter, the magazines that are out, that mom is thinking, okay, these are places my kid's going to pick it up, stick it in their mouth, and get some kind of virus. Today it's coronavirus. Next year it'll be whatever it'll be. But in their mind, now we all know. I mean, think about this, Jayme. How long does a virus live on a countertop or on paper or on cloth? We're all experts now, even if we're wrong. But it's in our frame of reference. So you're right. A practice, before they ask whether they do or not, they're walking into your office looking and saying, okay, especially if they have, or if they have an elderly, they're bringing their elderly mom or grandmother, they're thinking, okay, where can we pick this up? So so how would you recommend that? How do you do that? Let me put it that way.
Well, you can't just solve the problem. The point is you have to communicate the solution.
Yes.
So solving, let's use your example. Taking the paper off the countertop is fixing the problem, but now the job is to communicate the solution.
Okay.
Now you have to communicate that to considering patients, the patients who are what we call the searching patients. They're searching, they want to see, can you prove to me that this is taken care of? No matter how much they trust you, it's not a resolved concern until they come in and understand the resolution. It's not resolved. If it's not resolved, they're going to be considering and searching as a patient, which is why one of the biggest opportunities right now for startups is being there in a very ethical, high integrity way. Like, let me make something really clear. With what we're talking about here, like Steve, I know you and I agree on this. With what we're sharing, you are not allowed to use this to give someone else a disadvantage. You are not allowed to use this in a creepy, manipulative, corporate dentistry style way to take advantage of another practice owner or take advantage of somebody's situation. That is beneath the profession. That is beneath you as a clinician, of a person of integrity who's a community leader. That is beneath all of us. However, it is totally responsible and appropriate to observe and acknowledge that patients are asking these questions. And if someone else is not going to answer them, then it's your moral responsibility in service to your community. It is your responsibility to help address those concerns by answering their questions before they even ask them. So be the one who chooses to do that. It is perfectly natural, normal, acceptable, and I would say it's your moral responsibility as a caretaker in your community to answer those questions. So do that as an opportunity to serve your community at a really high level. If they choose to take that knowledge and go to another practice with, that's fine. But at least what we're finding is the ones who communicate it well are getting this waterfall of patients, and that's uniquely beneficial for startups.
So I know you do. You start a year ahead if somebody's planning to open a practice. There's a lot of nuts and bolts between then. Somebody who's starting now and says, "Okay, I understand this. I'm going to do it," or they're opening, or they're whatever the dynamic might be. They're going to start to communicate this and socialize this. Is there a time frame, or just start now, even though you may not be opening for 2 weeks, or you opened 3 weeks ago, or kind of, is it, I guess the question, is it an ongoing thing? How would you frame this up for somebody who's going to open to start saying, and I'm assuming a lot of social media is probably a good place to do that?
It can be a good place. Sometimes it's not a relevant place for some audiences, but if you're asking about some timeline, I'll give a couple answers. One is kind of like the shortcut. If you want a shortcut to the answer, I'll give you a resource that anybody can get for free, and then I'll give the explanation. So if you're somebody who likes the punchline, the shortcut, go to idealpractices.com/13, and you'll see our 13 stages to open a practice. It's a 1-year timeline. It's all laid out in very graphical form, very simple to comprehend, but it gives you the step-by-step sequence, the 13 stages to go from idea all the way to grand opening day. So from idea to grand opening in 13 stages with a 1-year timeline. So go to idealpractices.com/13 and get that for free. Okay, now here's the description. So it's a 1-year timeline. So if you go backwards in time, 12 months. So at the 12-month mark, you start building all the strategy, you begin all the negotiations. Around 9 months to 6 months prior to your opening, so here we are at the 1-year mark, we're now going to move forward. Now we're at like 9 months before opening. 9 months to 4 months, somewhere in that range here, before your opening day, which is over here. At that moment, then we start what's called the Startup Mba. This is where all the policies, systems, protocol, the Startup Mba is where we literally handhold and do all the hiring side by side, where we negotiate with the insurance companies or credential with the insurance companies, where we build all the strategies for marketing. This is when the Startup Mba begins. So half of the answer, Steve, is here, like at the beginning of the Startup Mba process, go from 12 months to 9 months. This is when it all begins. So then the third benchmark is, when do we release what we've planned? We've done our hiring, we've done our marketing strategy, we've done our final budgeting, we've installed the chairs, we now have all the protocol, the financial guidelines, the systems, the policies, the protocol, all that stuff. It's all done. The Startup Mba is done. It's at this moment, we call this the Hoover Dam moment. So the Hoover Dam, we all know it. The Hoover Dam is, it's this giant concrete structure, and there's a bunch of water behind the Hoover Dam. The Hoover Dam moment is when we release your messaging to the community. So we build up all the water behind the Hoover Dam. The Hoover Dam is the giant cement structure. We build up the water, build up the water, build up the water. All the water is the marketing, the messaging, the protocol, the planning. We let this all build up. So there's pressure. There's incredible pressure, particularly in marketing. We let the pressure build as the Hoover Dam grows, and then boom, we break the dam. We crush the dam and we flood the market, and we let all this pressure impact the community. That's the Hoover Dam moment. It's all pre-staged, it's all pre-planned. And this is how we end up getting our clients. Actually, the Dr. Trey, who I mentioned, the guy from South Carolina, who's going to show up on as interview number 5 on that website. You click on the yellow banner on our website, click on the COVID banner, you'll see Dr. Trey. Dr. Trey talks about how he was front page cover news coverage, totally for free, 3 times in 3 major publications in his community before he opened. Before his opening day, as a startup practice, 3 times getting coverage from the biggest local news media outlets in his community before he opened. Why? Because he went from the 12-month mark to the Startup Mba beginning, all the way up to the Hoover Dam moment, when all this pressure is building, and then we break the dam, it floods the market, and it has been, for him, it's a game changer. I mean, it's incredible to see how this happens. And things like that publicity, the front page coverage media exposure, that's worth tens of thousands of dollars. And here's the irony for a guy like Trey, like by doing all this and building up the pressure to the Hoover Dam moment, which is 2 weeks before opening day. I don't think I mentioned that. This is 2 weeks before opening day. 2 weeks before opening day, we break the dam. For Trey, here's the irony. In one of Trey's newspapers, you can see he's standing there like this. He's like arms crossed, like real proud, standing in black scrubs in a picture on the cover of the local newspaper. He's like this, and behind him is a brick building. I could see it was his brick building. And the picture was taken at a time where it was Trey like this, brick building behind him, talking all about his practice. It was released even before the Hoover Dam moment, which is one of the ways we build up the pressure ahead of time. So the article was released. As I'm looking at the picture, he forwarded it to me in an email. He's like, holy crap, Jayme, the publicity strategies totally worked. Look, I'm on the cover of the newspaper, right? So I open up this thing, I click on it, and here's what I saw. I looked at it and saw Trey in scrubs, brick building, but the building didn't even have a sign on it yet. which means every other practice in his town, I guarantee you, every other practice in town would have paid thousands of dollars for front page coverage like that. Every other practice in town, they would have killed, and let's be really harsh here. Like, you could argue that those other practices are more deserving of that front page coverage. Like, I don't know what Trey's clinical skills are like, but maybe there's another practice in town who has more advanced skills. Maybe that doctor deserves that publicity more, but guess who got it? Trey. Why? Because he went through the process and he got to the Hoover Dam moment with all the pressure and all the planning through the Startup Mba. That's the power of this. So I would say that in this timeline planning process, recognizing the 13 stages, go to idealpractices.com/13, you can get the free planner, but in the planning, recognize it's not just the dates. It's the strategy that leads to that date being fulfilled, the Startup Mba, then all the pressure to the Hoover Dam moment. It's not just the dates, it's all the implementation of the strategy inside those date lines. So how's that sound? That sounds like some good ideas.
So, and back to your point here at the beginning, sort of to bring it full circle, now is a time when Dr. Trey has something to say. You know, 6 months ago, it was, hey, I'm an awesome new dentist in town, and I do this, and I have this equipment. And I mean, there's only so much you can say. Today, you have sort of that new message, back to your point, to questions they're not asking yet, but they're up there. So what you're saying, what you have to say, or maybe what, you know, how the PR world works, you know, they want to hear something new and interesting. When I'm assuming you guys reach out to those media outlets and say, listen, here's what, you know, Dr. Jones is opening up over here, and here are the, you know, how they're addressing virus or contamination concerns or infection control. And you have a new message that gets that free publicity, that free PR. That's pretty cool.
It's pretty special.
And it only happens now. I mean, 6 months from now, it's, you know, that's the rearview mirror. You can't say, in fact, it probably is counterproductive 6 months from now to say, hey, look at all the new stuff we're putting in.
Then you're out of touch. Then you look like that's what you call tone deaf, right? That's right. So yeah, this is awesome. I hope I know some of these ideas they sound a little excitable, like, wow, that guy Jayme's got some energy. Like he sounds like these ideas are a little too flashy. No, listen, I just get excited. We love startups. Like here and overseas, we know startups change people's lives. As the practice owner, we know startups have an opportunity to change entire communities. We've literally seen ripple effects where the doctor's values lead the practice reputation. The practice values lead the practice reputation, not the discounts.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like, there's so many practices who lead with discounts, and they're frustrated with the results. Leading with values as a startup allows you to start with fresh, clean, intentional DNA. With a startup, this is why I love what we get to do. So there you go.
Which is why I reached out to you. I knew you were the guy. And you know, we've talked many times before about this, and that's it's interesting how the business piece of starting a practice or managing a practice or running a practice gets can easily get pushed aside. And you know, there are right ways to do startups and not so right ways. And again, as we've talked, I'm a big fan of let the pros do what they do well, and you do what you do well. And I think you, at the end of the day, trying to save a few bucks, you know, I don't know, you know, maybe there's somebody out there, Jayme, that was an awesome dental school student and is a great dentist and is a better lease negotiator than, you know, somebody who does it all the time and it's what you do. But I probably don't know them. I think at the end of the day, you tally it up and say, wow, that do-it-yourself job was really awesome, except, you know, it only cost you $50,000 extra. And I mean, you can be talking like, I mean, you can be easily talking those kind of numbers. So, but you save $2,000, you know, to pay $50,000 extra. And,
yeah, it's true. And this is why I love what the Profitable Dentist is all about. I mean, the platform that you, Steve, that has been built up over the years with some incredible legacy names of the pillars of dentistry that we all get to benefit from today, the hard work that the Profitable Dentist team has done over the years. It's inspiring, and I'm incredibly grateful myself for the platform and the exposure that you're inviting me into in particular, amongst the other 60-some interviews that you've done recently. It is awesome to see how we as a community can come together and support the next and rise up to the next era of dentistry. What we're about to emerge upon, the deck will be reset, and the future is going to be really strong as we figure out this next stage for the whole industry. So thank you for setting all that up.
Likewise, I think you and I think we're perfectly in alignment there. I think it'll be sad to see a lot of practices not make it, and a lot won't, and a lot of retire. You know, again, I'm in touch with a lot of practice owners, and a lot of them are just retiring 3 years before they were going to anyway, which is, you know, I don't know, good or bad, but they're probably doing a smart thing for themselves. But again, that leaves a lot of searching patients or displaced patients who now have to go somewhere. And I think so the whole dynamic of dentistry changes. And you said it very well at the beginning. There will be a beginning and there will be an end, where this is the before coronavirus and after. And it's just going to change. So you can be part of the change that didn't do so well, or you can choose to be part of the change that just goes ahead and does the things you need to do. But fundamentally, I think we agree. There is no better time. These unique things will never happen again. If you're thinking about a startup,
that's true.
Do it right now. Get that ball rolling. Take the leap and the jump. And you know, again, we don't. I mean, I know what you do, and I watch a lot of docs who get, what did my friend, he called it, kids nowadays get a degree from the University of YouTube. And, you know, they learn how to do whatever. Starting up a dental practice, you can learn a lot. But I think at the end of the day, like I've said before, just pay somebody who does that part well and allow you to do your part well. So, and you're a guy who does that. And I've watched your startups just, I mean, it's amazing. So you do this thing, we'll share with the audience, you do this thing on startup day that is pretty cool to watch. And I mean, practice owners you can just see what it's supposed to be like. When you finally get out of dental school, you finally decide to do your own thing. You finally start it up, and it just comes to life because of a year's worth of planning, 13 months worth of planning.
It's amazing. Startups have a really special place in my heart. And then seeing the ripple effect with, you know, hundreds of locations all over the country, it's really special to be a part of all that. So
that's
thank
the
you for
way
letting
it
us
should be.
share our
Yeah.
thoughts.
You shouldn't be scared on that first day. I mean, it is terrifying starting any business, but you know, having somebody there and you know you've done the right thing helps a lot. So, and I wanted to make sure I had this right. The idealpractice.com/13. And
Ideal Practices, so a plural.
Excuse me.
Yep, idealpractices.com/13 to get that planner. Yep.
We'll put that below, and that's free, right? Just 13 steps.
Oh, yeah.
It's really what you guys do, right? It's the whole.
We have hundreds of hours of free stuff available. Hundreds of hours, lots and lots of free stuff. Just so you know, the reason we do that is, sure, sometimes some of those doctors apply for our consulting program, but just in full disclosure, that's great when it looks like a good fit, but we only accept 5 or 6 applicants into our program each month anyway. We get hundreds of applicants every year, and for us, it's not about trying to do more. We just want to do 5 or 6 wonderfully and powerfully and beautifully each month, and for us, that's enough. For others, maybe they just want to do more and more, and whatever, that's good for them. For us, this is our situation, and so that's why all this stuff is free. Then it can benefit anybody, whether or not we work together.
And even if if your time frame is a year, 2 years, 3 years, you know, it's not a thing that you decide to start up and next month you open the doors. So,
right. Yeah. Yep. Though the process is about a year. Yeah, you're right. 18 months to 2 years is when we usually suggest begin the planning phase. But then things take off. They begin actually in motion around that 1 year mark.
Awesome. And then I've got here startupdentistpodcast.com.
Yeah.
And that's your masterclass, right?
Yeah. Yep. Free audio masterclass.
Okay. Awesome. And that's that also is free.
Yes.
Good deal. I'll make sure those are in there. And again, I you know, and I've walked through the startup process. I think it's amazing. And I know there are times when you get anxious and you want to do it all now, but you know, you're right. Take the time to do it. So if I'm an associate right now who wants to open my own practice, it's probably a good time to go ahead and get that started right now.
Not probably, like now is like
3 months behind, and
it's only a good time if you want to save another like $300,000 to $1 million and grow faster than any other time in the history of startups in dentistry. But if those things are not interesting to you, then wait till next year.
Right. All right. Well, good. Well, Jayme, I appreciate you doing this, and
thank you.
I know it's interesting. Everybody's sort of from home, and you know, I didn't hear any of your kids or dog or it's the funny thing is we're going to do like a B-roll of I've had like you know, people sitting at their laptop all serious, and suddenly the cat walks right across their keyboard.
Hey, that's cool.
And you know, all kinds of things happen, and that's just fine. You know, it's sort of a funky time in the world, so.
We're all in it together.
Any parting thoughts? Anything you want to share with that associate out there that's, you know, waiting to take the leap?
Get started, because you don't want to be those doctors. I speak with many. They're 10 years into their career or more, and they say, I love this. I have no regrets with a startup. I'm so glad I started even 10 years in, except I guess there is one thing that I wish I didn't do. I wish I started sooner.
Yeah.
So don't be like that guy or that gal. And listen, if you are that person and you're 10 years in or 20 years in, and now's the time to get started, great. Like the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago or today. Right. So get started, get moving, and here's to an awesome future in dentistry. Thank you, Steve.
Awesome. Jayme Amos, Ideal Practices, idealpractices.com, and then idealpractices.com/13. Tons of free resources. And with that, Jayme, thanks for coming on.
Thanks,
Practice owners, see you next time.